The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed on the Canna Connect Show belong solely to the individuals and do not reflect those of Canna Connect and its affiliates, sponsors, or partners. Canna Connect does not promote or facilitate any activity that violates state or federal regulations. Everything you hear here is strictly for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not legal advice, it is not financial guidance, and it's definitely not medical direction. Seriously, don't take our word for it. Even if someone on the mic sounds like they know what they're talking about, and they're probably crazy smart too. Regardless of how legit our guests may be, you should always do your own homework, consult with your attorney, and understand the risk you're taking before you do anything when it comes to cannabis. Our intention is to keep it real. If you've got a problem with anything we've said, take us to court.
Welcome back to the Canna Connect Show. I'm your host, Stephen Eigenmann, and today I'm joined by two very special guests, Patrick Doran with Local 49 and Benjamin Mike with Local 49. Guys, introduce yourself real quick for the audience.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Doran. I'm General Counsel of Local 49, IUOE Local 49, which is the International Union of Operating Engineers.
I'm Benjamin Mike. I'm a labor organizer with Local 49. I just recently started January of 2025 and pretty excited to be on this level to be able to help people.
Amazing. In today's show, we get into quite a bit around why the labor movement matters, as well as dig into where Local 49 can serve the greater cannabis industry in Minnesota. And we generally have a conversation around industry, both cannabis and non-cannabis, because we are talking about a legal industry that's fighting for progress, and Local 49 brings a lot of wisdom to the industry. So really excited to sit down with you guys and appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Steve.
Let's get into it.
You know, the vast majority of our membership is in a piece of equipment, but not everybody. You know,
And some of that equipment is not mobile, right? We're talking about stationary, right? The history of IUOE, the International Operating Engineer, right? That was a steam engineer. Was a steam engine that was powering something. Maybe wasn't mobile, right? So now you're in the boilers, you're in the systems that that are stationary. So that it's evolved. So again, in our 100-year history,
Right.
We'll be celebrating our 100-year history here to see it evolve from one to the next. If we're not evolving as 49, then we are not growing. And in order to keep membership and keep, looking out in the protection of the exploited worker, you need to evolve. You need to advance, right?
Yeah.
That business development, those are things that we learn, right? I mean, Patrick's in-house counsel, myself, right? This is where we think the business agents are there to enforce contracts, right? Together, collectively, like anything that we hear in good success, right?
Yeah.
And I would imagine most of the cannabis industry thinks like that. Of my time spent at, like I say, Lucky Leaf and Nican and down at Vegas for his MJ Biz, right? Like, that's what we hear is they still believe in a collective thought, right? It's real easy.
Yeah.
Well, that's what a union is. That's what a union is. When he says CBA, it's a collective bargaining agreement. So again, holding true to the value of what a union is, not without losing sight of having to evolve, right? And business that, like I say, that business development.
Hey everybody, Stephen with Canna Connect, taking a quick minute to shout out today's sponsor, CEE. That is the Center for Energy and Environment. If you're not familiar with CEE, they're your one-stop shop for all lighting rebates. If you are in XL Energy territory and you're a micro business, CEE is somebody that you need to talk to. Give Brad a call, give Tony a call, go online. One-stop shop, LED lighting rebates. They'll help take care of up to 60% of the costs associated with your grow and your build-out with the lighting. Really nice people, great people to work with, huge sponsors of Canna Connect, and give them a shout. That's CEE, Center for Energy and Environment. I mean, you guys are 100 years old this year. The Minnesota cannabis industry is coming up on 3 years old this year. There's an element of it's not going to be a perfect fit for everybody right away.
Correct.
Some folks are filling their pre-rolls themselves. Some folks are using larger machinery to fill their pre-rolls. And then there's the question of how many pre-rolls are you filling? Because that will start to change over the years.
That's right.
And so having paid attention to the industry from the onset of legalization, Local 49 finds itself in a good place to serve the Minnesota cannabis industry with the 100 years of experience and the range and size of employees that you cater to or that are members of your organization. And there's a level of entry point. I think Highway 35 LLC or the Unbound brand is the right place to be looking, given it's still in its infancy and what you're going to see from company sizes.
That's right. You know, as an organizer, as a labor organizer, as I talk to employees of, of various fields, the tour that they provided up at Highway 35 just recently, it wasn't the union banging on the drum saying that we need to be in here. 49 needs to learn more about where they're at, where they want to go, what they need to be, what support they're going to need. So as the industry is still evolving in the cannabis industry, we are learning with it, right? We have time invested now, right?
Yeah.
We've been to, like I say, MJ BizCon twice, right? We've invested on that time. We've invested in the Lucky Leaf, right? We're investing in.
You've partnered with Canna Connect.
Canna Connect is a big one now to be able to help push our message or promote our message that we're here and ready to listen, right? We're seeing it with the LPAs that are getting signed, right? The big push on the beverage industry.
Yeah.
When that LPA, that deadline hit and there was no change, the 11th hour came, Patrick came through and, we were able to craft something on that beverage side. So they are turning to us because I think we are willing to listen. And I would push that message to, again, the one owner or the guy that might have 400 employees already.
Yep.
What does it mean? Like, how can we listen? What do we need to learn? Where do we need to craft that?
Yeah. And Minnesota is seen as a smaller market in general compared to the national legalized states. We're protective of the craft industry. And that's more so we talk about the craft industry, which you see in those products, but we also talk about the industry and the greater size of it. But there's going to be a range in size of companies, and understanding that you don't have to be a brewery and you don't have to be the largest cannabis company in Minnesota to have a conversation with Local 49, to understand how Local 49 is going to be set up to potentially provide you benefits.
I would agree on that. And I think a perfect example is the meeting some of the craft brewers, local craft brewers now, from Duluth to Minneapolis, and hearing their story about that micro craft brew business has remained that. And we were just at the event a couple weeks ago.
The Craft Cannabis, the Brewers Guild.
Which was awesome, right? Because what did we hear over there? We don't have a macro brewer in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I think Minnesotans in general could take a lot of pride in the fact that you're not getting a quote unquote watered, it's coming in from somewhere else. Those craft brews, micro or larger.
Yeah.
But we even heard it, 3 million barrels, that's still not a large brewer. And that's amazing. To me, that's amazing as being a craft, locally owned, locally sourced.
Yeah.
Right. To me, I think that's pretty amazing to have that still, and that industry is just as strong. And then for the cannabis to be starting out in that at that level,
right?
I would highly encourage those guys to continue to hold on to that craft part of that.
Yeah. I mean, whatever small microbrewery comes to mind for you that's popped up in the last few years, compare that to Summit or Surly on the other side of the spectrum. That's all still craft.
That's correct. That's correct.
And so, this is a few interviews in today, right? We've been talking about the industry all day,
sure,
with some great experts. And I'm guilty of writing off Surly or writing off Summit as one of the big guys. But when you are dealing with the potential of federal ban when the breweries are looking at the potential ban of hemp beverages at the end of this year, you start to see groups band together,
right?
Because you start to realize we're all in this together. There aren't that many big fish in the pond. Minnesota craft beer being one. Hey, we're all different size fish, but we're nowhere near the giants of national distribution, of national brands. And so beer is a good example of what this industry could look like, cannabis could look like. But there's also the agriculture side. There's the outdoor grow. There's the potential for greenhouses and vertical integration. And I think if you guys could talk about why the labor movement matters and bring it back to cannabis as a new industry or a nascent industry, let's talk about the 100-year history, but let's talk about why the labor movement matters now.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think you could tie it directly into what we had just been talking about in terms of kind of cannabis being, in essence, in its infancy stages. And what that means for business and why we think the labor movement is important for the cannabis industry is because, when we have an industry, like we've been talking about, that it's in its infancy stages, that can cause, whether it's malicious or based on ignorance or whatever, that can cause exploitation of the workers, right? Because I think this is a situation where, and by ignorance or malicious, we'll put on the side. We understand what that means, but ignorance is we just don't understand the regulations. We don't understand the rules. I'm sorry, in this cannabis industry, what Ben said about, I don't want to have to shop for health insurance. I don't want to, all these things. Maybe I'm starting my own company or I'm growing because now I'm in the hemp beverage industry. And so why I think the labor movement is important is to protect the workers that are going to enter into this industry early, right? And because the regulations, I know Minnesota and the Office of Cannabis Management kind of has its own set of issues right now. And, maybe those are too tight of restrictions and maybe they're going to loosen up, and we don't know what the expectation is for that. But what we do know is that when we have an industry that is new, that there is a lot of uncertainty, and the union's job, first and foremost, as I talked about earlier, is to make sure that the workers that are getting into that industry are protected, that they're making a living wage, that they can retire with dignity, or even if it's an entry-level position, that there's training that's available to them, that they can go and get a certification that can get them a higher wage, maybe in the same industry. Maybe they go from kind of unloading pallets to working on the boiler or running a forklift or whatever that may be. So there's room for growth. We're not saying that everybody needs to make, a big total package in terms of what their wage and benefits are, but, we want to meet these people where they are.
Yeah.
And we worry when the industry, maybe worry is not the right word, but we want to make sure that the employers understand what they need to do to get, on the path. And we want to make sure that the employees are protected.
And the reality is because this is a fun industry to work in, because this is a one of those sin tax type products, right? Alcohol, tobacco, cannabis. You find people that are willing to work in this industry because they are so passionate about the product, but then they're somewhat delusional to their rights as employees. And that's the reality that we're dealing with. That's why wages are low in this industry, because they can get away with it, because there's a lot of people that want to work in this industry. But I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's the human nature element of, if somebody's willing to do something, maybe they don't have to be paid as much.
Yeah, it's a bit of a give and take, because I think there is a time and a place for what I would just generally call entry-level wages.
Okay.
Right? And so if you got businesses are in the business of making money.
Yeah.
And Local 49 is aware of that, and we understand that not everybody's going to make $80 an hour or whatever the number is, right? And so there is a time and a place for entry-level wages, and maybe I'll let Ben speak to this more, on the organizing point side of things, but it's about the misclassification. Is this person 1099 or are they an employee, right? And is this, the state of Minnesota with the big fraud case, the misclassification was $1.27 million, right? The state of Minnesota cares about whether or not workers are being classified as employees, 1099 workers. Are these employers, again, it could be malicious, but it could be ignorant. They just don't know any better, right? And there's an education piece of this too, as we're getting in on the ground level of what this industry is going to be. So I wouldn't want an employer to look at us and say, well, they're just going to jack up my bottom line and I'm going to have to pay all my employees $50 an hour or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what we were talking about earlier. Yes, we're in the business of protecting our members, getting our members fair wages and benefits, but we also understand that it's kind of meet them where they are, kind of thing. And so there's kind of a difference between exploiting workers, which obviously as a union we're completely against, but there's also this understanding of what's good for the employer can sometimes be good for the employee, because we want the business to succeed.
Yes.
And the employee isn't going to get raises or move up in the chain if the employer isn't succeeding, because they're going to have to find a new job, maybe start over again, whatever it may be. So it's all kind of connected,
right.
And that's what we specialize in and we know about, and we can, again, meet these people where they're at. But I think I can talk a little bit more about.
Well, and also I want to add training as an element of ongoing support, and how you've had success stories outside of cannabis, because you guys can utilize that knowledge whether it's indirectly or directly, in advancing the workforce.
That's right. So state of Minnesota, to have an apprenticeship program, right, it has to meet a set of rules and protocol that comes with that. I mean, we have a well-established training program that exists for an apprenticeship, right? So even to say that you have a genuine or bona fide apprenticeship program, it has to meet a certain amount, right? And there we are reporting back. Those hours are recorded, right? So there's again, it's a check and balance that happens in order to be even a bona fide apprenticeship program. So that knowledge and experience that we have can be brought to the cannabis industry at some point in time, right? But it's going to take people. It's going to take people wanting to sign up with 49. It's going to take time, right? It's going to be a movement. That employer, though, will have input. What do they need to see for training? We've done it in all sorts of industries that are what I would call specialty. So like sewer and water. That's specialty, right? They're digging around utilities, gas lines, water lines, right? Sanitary, right? That's a specialty. They've added that class up to the training center. So to be able to add or adapt to what the need is right now, right? We've got lead line replacement that's happening, right? That training needs to now happen. So we have those, we don't have those we do not have those gas line hits, right? We hear stories every year across the country. Somebody's putting it's called HDD, it's horizontal drilling, right? They're
directional drilling.
That's correct. They punch that through the ground blind, right? And they're using old maps. So it takes a skilled worker to be able to punch that through the ground without hitting a gas line. And then recognizing signs if one does get hit on what needs the protocol that needs to happen in order to evacuate an area to make sure lives are saved, right? That we don't have those injury and deaths, right? We learn that every year, right? The state of Minnesota, it's called the Go for State 1, right? Go for State 1 call, right? We're calling before we dig, right? Those things exist, and those are things that 49 participates in. So again, that history, that experience can be brought to the cannabis industry, but it takes partners, right? We're not going to develop it on our own and then hope, right? But if somebody's going to come to us knowing that we're going to listen, then we can start to put something together. We can have something that's there for an employer. This is what I need when these people show up. Cool. Let's get that put together.
Yeah, I appreciate the wisdom, the collective wisdom of the elders that I've been able to meet at Local 49, right? Like the guys that have reached the boardroom because of the 20, 30, 35-year career that they've had, and they've been voted on by their members to be the representatives at the headquarters and out in the field. That's as you work, Benjamin. But the ability to take on a new industry, it has to be bite size.
That's right.
Neither side can overcommit.
Yeah, that would be fair to say. I mean, I think to Benjamin's point, 49 has obviously been a willing participant in this industry. We want to be able to help employers and employees alike. We want to be able to protect the membership if they decide to be a part of Local 49. But we can't create our training program or have extra classes or whatever it may be, whether it's from one class to whatever this thing looks like 20 years in the future, without input from the employers. And we can't get the input unless they have the same buy-in that we do, right? And so
that participation, right? They decided to enter into an agreement or a partnership with 49. Once they've made that agreement, right, that voice is loud and clear now. They've entered into an agreement. And I would again go back to the cannabis industry as a whole, or what I've learned, right? They want to take care of their people, right? It's not the same corporate greed as some nameless, faceless, private equity firm, right? It's going to be, hi, Steve, I've started this thing, right? You've got your beverage that you're going to roll out, right? You've already partnered with Earl Isles, right? Yeah. So you guys are already starting those we're just going to be another component as it blossoms, as it develops, right? Yeah. We understand regulation is still uncertain, right? Every day there's new information that's coming out about where we're going to land on this thing by the time we get to November. Yeah. But that participation doesn't have to be directly related to recreational cannabis. Right. If you are a craft brewer, or if you're producing a drink, or if you're producing even the that opportunity still exists, not in there. And I think we heard that the other day when from the 3 panel that were up there, right? The one thing they talked about is they're going to be willing to adapt. And some of those, the liquor store that we heard from, right? He's prepared to adapt. I think he had 10 stores maybe, if I remember correctly.
Even more,
Yeah, right. He's already prepared to adapt. If it means not using credit cards, he'll drop the credit cards, right? If it means going to shifting this way, like he's prepared. So not, or being young or starting out, right? You've already up against some barriers.
Yep.
And that's knowledge or experience that somebody else is taking to learn.
Yeah.
You know, so how do we take some of that away? We offer that health insurance, right? The pension that's going to get involved, right? It doesn't have to be these big giant packages that you would see. I wouldn't expect it to be. I don't think it'd be fair for a startup. Not at all. But what does it mean to have that at least that basic package? The terms of condition, right, of employment, right? The progressive discipline, right? You're not getting in to grow this plant to be able to have an org management committee meeting every Thursday and decide on how we're going to do progressive discipline, right? We could put that together. That exists already. That's a template that already exists. How do we craft that to fit into yours? So that helps, to Patrick's point.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to come, help meet us, help yourself and meet with us.
Right.
Let's get signed. Let's get, what does it mean? What does it look like? And then, hey, let's help push that forward.
Right. Right. It is a significant risk, and I commend you and Local 49 for participating as far as you have with the cannabis industry, because there are so many unknowns. We could talk about the Amy Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar and Senator Paul from Kentucky, their bill that would allow for any states that have defined hemp as a low potency product in their state, that there could be state to state trade. So brewers in Minnesota could still ship products to South Carolina, right? For example, let's use Georgia. That's a better example. That would allow a path forward for breweries and the labor peace agreements that you have in place.
That's right.
But there are a number of other scenarios that debilitate the industry and would cause it to shrink temporarily before it would expand over years and years. And that is something that you guys are going to pay close attention to as the year continues. We all are. It's a legitimate threat, though, because you could potentially see, if we were to fully deschedule, cannabis is now like alcohol. Not to say there aren't rules and licenses in place, but it's not a scheduled drug.
Correct. It'll just be traditional regulations like alcohol as
ATF.
Yeah, as opposed to special regulations like we have.
That's right.
With schedules.
And so if that were to happen, which isn't going to happen today or tomorrow, you would see pockets like California would become the largest grower of cannabis, because it would be moving across state lines, like oranges in Florida, for example. Traditional commerce across America.
Yeah.
We're 5+ years from that being a reality. Not to say it's certain by any means, but there is that potential for shift. Colorado then becomes the hemp for fiber, and you start to see large patches of CBD being grown across Colorado, like mass scales. Not a bad trade-off, because the machines will get bigger if you open up state lines, and then you have regional trade. Canada is very good at growing for seed, so you have hemp hearts that come out of Canada, like Manitoba Harvest, and you can buy them at Costco, everywhere. So cannabis will never go away, but we are in a significant shifting period right now. You guys are on board, and you're feeling some of those changes as you talk to more people in the industry. I'm not going to say it's a bumpy ride, but it gets moved around a lot. You got to be agile. And I think
that's with any industry. We see that even in our traditional industry of what we represent.
Good.
I mean, you see the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of just economic shift, right? Housing's up, right? We've got massive housing development, right? Housing's down, right?
We get a bonding.
Correct. Is the bonding bill, right? So those shifts happen, I would say, in any industry.
It's capitalism.
That's correct.
Yeah. It's our society.
You're right. The recession, now we're not going to do this. We're going to see more public investment. We're going to see more investment in roads, right? All of a sudden, it goes the other way. And now we're going to see development of apartment buildings or housing, or big stretches of land that are going to get developed, right? Right now, it's data centers, it's power generation, it's the transmission lines, right? That's the next big push right now. We're seeing literally billions of dollars that are going to get spent in that, but they're going through their own regulation issues, right?
Right.
What's going to be their water use? What's the consumption on energy? What is the supplemental supply for power, right? We have people that are going to these local meetings, state meetings to try to understand what's happening, right? You've got NDAs that are existing on when they show up in a neighborhood, right? So, I mean, you have local leaders that can't even talk about it because somehow they've been strong-armed into a NDA, right? Again, we're protecting that work on that level. So,
And you have the ability to help cultivation
that's right.
of the data centers.
That's right.
Right? That the construction of, but you guys, that's interesting. Like you guys can protect and build.
That's correct. So depending on where it fits, right? The local community wants to make their decision. Once they've made their decision, right? We have the skilled workforce to do it amongst the other craft trades, right? To do the work. And then what means for the work after the fact? Doesn't mean that there's 50 local jobs in a data center, right? Does that mean stationary engineers, right? We've, on an international level, I'm hearing that on our conference calls, right? They're talking to the large data center owners and saying, well, gonna need to man this. We're gonna need to be able to staff this. What does this mean? Well, we have a training program down in Houston, Texas, right? We've got local training centers, amongst the different locals that exist. So I would say for what cannabis is feeling, they're not necessarily alone, right? I can very quickly equate it to power generation, data center,
Mining.
Mining's another one, right? Think about what we fight on regulation just on the mining alone. Right, for northern Minnesota. Right. Michigan goes through the same mining issues, right? So again, there's a shared experience, right, that's happening amongst different states. That information is getting shared amongst our peers in that state. So yeah, cannabis isn't alone in the regulated industry, in the industry, in the sense of of this ebb and flow that happens, right? We're seeing it, and I just listed the examples of how much exists that what I would say is similar to cannabis.
Legal industry
At
the Capitol, vying for progress.
That's the common denominator. All this is happening at the Capitol. All these, when we're talking about data centers, when we're talking about mining, when we're talking about cannabis, when we're even talking about residential housing to some extent, we're talking about what is the discussion from our legislators, which is just generally why it's important to vote in your elections, right? To make sure that your voice is heard in these decisions that are being made. You can be pro-data center or anti-data center or pro-mining or anti-mining or somewhere in between, right? All these decisions get made by the people that we elect, and that's why it's important to vote. But that's the common denominator, right? We're all eyes are on the Capitol, whether it's DC or St. Paul.
Absolutely.
And that's where these decisions are being made. And obviously 49 has its kind of, I don't know, position's the right word, philosophy about how we feel about these certain things. Ben mentioned, like, if Rosemount citizens vote that they want a data center in their community, we'll be there to build it, right? And so you can kind of take the politics out of it from a 49 perspective. We just want to put people to work, in places that people want them to work. And so, that's just like cannabis. It's almost when we're talking about meeting employers where they are, we can meet the industry where it is, right? And so us, like you, we're keeping an eye on what's going on.
Yeah.
But I don't think it causes us any confusion or heartache or anything like that. We're just going to meet people where they are. We've already invested in this industry. We want to help employers and employees alike, and citizens, just regular people like you and I, try to make a living and provide for their families and help these businesses grow to the extent that they need us. We talk about all the time, our highway heavy agreement, our main agreement. When we see road construction, I used to despise it, but now I love it, right? And so it's one of those things. But
I'm a big fan of 280.
That's funny.
Yeah, right.
Me too. But we talk about success stories. These companies that 20 years ago or however 10 years ago, there were 3 or 4 people. And now they have 50 operators, right? Wow. And we've been there along the way, not saying that we made it happen, right? These employers are making it happen, but we've been kind of a stable partner throughout, right? That's the terms and conditions of employment, it's expectations, it's benefit packages, it's training for their employees. It's, a big thing that's happening in our industry right now is mental health. We're making a huge investment into mental health as part of our health and welfare benefit package. All employees, or it could be management too, depending on the situation, have access to free with therapists. They can call teams, correct? They can call teams. We just had we had a couple of union members killed and out on the road doing their job, and some up north, and team is there, and they'll send people out and they'll do the grief counseling and stuff like that. And if you're having marital issues or
Financial.
or you're just dealing with things personally, in our highway heavy agreement, all members are going to be taking a penny per hour out of their wage and putting it towards the Minnesota Construction Mental Health Alliance. So
Tell me about that.
Well, it's a program the construction industry in general is, at least historically, and even today, although it's slightly better, has been more male driven, right? It's mostly men, and there's this kind of unspoken, and I'd like to think it's getting better now, and I try to do my best at it, that men just kind of bottle up their feelings and just live with it, and I got to tough it out, and so I think Local 49 is making an active effort at telling people it's okay not to be okay. We want you to be healthy. You're going to be able to show up to work on time and do your best if you're feeling good.
Yeah.
And however that looks for you, if it's a therapist or if it's medication or it's just talking to someone or whatever it is, we want to be able to provide that for you because we think that benefits the industry. The suicide rate is really high in construction, too high. And that's another thing. Our leadership team at Local 49 has made a very concerted effort in, talking about it at our membership meetings. I know our chief of staff, Mark Pothin, went with other trades and employers to essentially a small conference to talk to people. What can we do to help these folks that are out there, that are our members, in any way that we can? Brainstorming ideas, coming up with talking points or programs or whatever it may be. So we have Mark sits on the Mental Health Alliance board, and so we have a voice and employers have a voice. And it's really just there to figure out a way to reduce that suicide rate, to make sure that people understand in this industry, that is mainly, employed by men, that it's okay not to be okay. And it's okay to talk to somebody, and it's okay to get help, because I think that's going to benefit you. That's going to benefit your families. And weirdly enough, it's going to benefit your coworkers and your employer, and you're going to, it's a ripple effect, right? It's first and foremost, obviously, it's about you and what, your needs are and getting help. And so that, in the last probably 12 to 24 months, Local 49 has been making a really big effort at that. And
it's a message that needs to get out there. Yeah. It's because it's one of those messages that this needs to be repeated each time, right? Every day. Hear it more. Yeah. As you hear it more, right? It lessens the barrier, right? It takes away from the stigma, right? And we're seeing it in other professions, right? We see it in professional sports now, right? That you have spokespeople now that are talking about mental health, right? So we're seeing it more. Right. So for 49 to participate in it and then to make a financial commitment to it, to make sure that message continues to get repeated, right? It's like anything, right? Everybody's always a little leery about it, and we got to break down these old ideas and myths, and then all of a sudden it becomes now commonplace. Yeah, now it's okay to talk about it. So when somebody says, hey, I don't feel that great, and you say it at a lunchbox, maybe you're able to go talk to that coworker now and be like, hey, man, you're able to engage without fear. Wow. So I think it's important to Patrick's point on where the leadership is taking that stance.
We just want to care about our brothers and sisters that are working hard.
Yeah.
That are helping move the labor movement forward. The union is about people taking care of themselves and their families, right? That's really what the labor movement is about: protecting worker rights, making sure that they have a living wage, make sure they retire with dignity, and this is all together, right? And mental health has obviously come a long way than it was even just 10 years ago, right? And I think 49 wants to be part of that discussion because, the statistics show that our industry is a little harder hit than most industries. It's late hour, you could be working second shift overnight on a road project and you hardly see your family, or I'm on a mine up north and my family's in Roseville, and I don't see them but for a weekend every now and again during the summer season, right? And so all these things can weigh on people. And like Ben said, if it could just help one person at a lunchbox look at their coworker and say, hey man, I'm just not feeling okay, and just make the discussion needs to be had. And we feel like, and we appreciate our members too, right? Are in their own right, giving up a very small, 1 cent portion, but that adds up over time with all the hours that the guys work. And we're hoping that it makes a real impact for our community. And we think that we can provide something similar, right? These are things that can be available to those in the cannabis industry, the teams, talking about the Mental Health Alliance, whatever.
Well, and think about where we're going with plant medicine.
Correct.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, it ties right back into it, right? Is there something that's an alternative, but doesn't impair somebody's work ability, right? I mean, we hear the stories about, aging parents now,
Not being able to drive.
or they're participating in some of those low-derived, right? There's the medicinal, right? We're seeing probably what would have been traditionally frowned upon all those years ago when they were, at that age, but now they're 70, they're getting into those later years
For pain management,
right? Or just to be able to sleep or to relax the mind, right? We're seeing all the different derivatives that exist out there, and you see those barriers starting to lessen. And then that opportunity for our parents in general, right? Those people that are, maybe 65 and older, right? If it's recreationally, so be it. But they're willing to take it in a form of a gummy. They're willing to take it in a form of a drink, right? It's the stigma of what existed on Reefer Madness.
But hemp beverage all the way to Ibogaine.
Correct. All the derivatives.
For PTSD.
That's right.
For military folk.
Exactly.
Loud environments. I think about the loud environments that your members work in and how that adds more stress to the job.
Absolutely.
Let alone the
That's right. So to be able to go home and unwind and kind of calm themselves, right? To find that moment of peace, right? So it's not, maybe they're not getting lost in a beverage all night long. Right. And then it just compounds on itself. Right. If they're able to find a moment of peace. Right. And then decompress, what that looks like. Right. And then making sure that the product doesn't impair the operator or whoever it might be, wherever they're working. Right. They still need to be a productive member of society. Absolutely. Right. We're not looking to melt into the couch.
A trusted member of society.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right. So if they're adult, responsible, that opportunity to go home and find that relaxation, right? Like I said, again, the parent finding all the different derivatives on what they're looking for as an aging adult like that. So how does that even help then? It is an active member of society.
And it's the 6-pack is not, the 6-pack of hemp beverages doesn't exist actually. It's the 4-pack.
That's right.
And the reason why is you don't drink as many of them,
right?
It's simple. I've got a 6-pack of lager in one part of my fridge. I got a couple 4-packs. I brought most of them. I got one for you if you want to try it.
Awesome.
And what I'm hearing from the top 10 liquors of the world is that folks are drinking 1 before bed, 2. They're not coming back to the liquor store. It is sold at a liquor store, but they're not coming back to the liquor store as frequently.
Yeah, or even splitting it.
Sure. Yep.
We saw that. We heard that from
the 10 milligram ones. My wife and I will occasionally split, if that's what it is, that's what it is. And it's like Ben said, it's all about doing, kind of ties into the mental health thing.
Correct. Right. Because that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we have been stigmatized by alcohol.
Correct.
You and I, we met as teenagers or right around. And so there was a certain pressure to alcohol, to beverage, to drinking culture.
Sure.
So when we talk about cannabis and we say, this one doesn't even have any cannabinoids in it. This is non-dosed. So when we talk about, there's a fearful context when we have to clear it. Hey, I'm splitting it. But it's because we grew up from Will Ferrell and movies that like Superbad and where you, and before that there was generations of movies.
Sure, you go all the way back to Animal House, and before that, it's always been part of the culture. It's just alcohol was the
big drinking.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember when we were in college and you walked into the basement of the dorm room and there was that sign. I don't know why I remember this. It's like, if you binge drink, you're eating this many cheeseburgers or whatever. At the bottom,
it was always a pork chop can.
Yeah, the bottom of Brady's
like a dentist poster on the wall.
Yeah, right. But it was normal. It was normalized. Right?
It was.
And I think times are different now for many reasons, and that being one of them. Obviously, I'm sure you're acutely aware of the statistics around the generation after us, right, and how significantly less alcohol they're drinking than the generations before them. I think think I just read a statistic somewhere that said, 20 to 29-year-olds are drinking less alcohol now than in the last however many decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of that is
They have more options.
That was what we learned that was what we learned the other day, right? We learned that the idea of the craft brewer, the micro brewer, needs to change. The idea of and we kind of had some fun with it, right? With the turned up mustaches and maybe the silly hat or whatever.
Guys.
Yeah, right. Like I get it, the craft and the fun and right, that the palate. And what we heard from the keynote speaker was that honeymoon is over. It needs to change. And we heard from Top 10 Liquors, right? They're coming in and they might be getting a bottle of Tito's, but they might pick up that 4-pack.
A little bit of both.
To your point, right? I can maybe have both or different at different times for different purposes. So to have it exist is as an option. We're hearing that, like I say, from Top 10.
I just want to get back to the plant-based element of it as well. Of course, because 5 milligrams THC, low dose, even if you split it 2.5.
Yep.
But they're talking about Ibogaine, which is full-on flush.
Sure.
The most intense treatment. And it all comes back to mental health. It all comes back to consciousness. We don't drink so much because we don't feel the need to. It's a different drug. It's a plant-based medicine. And it's not medical marijuana, but that whole vernacular needs to change, and it needs to just become cannabis.
Sure.
And then we measure cannabis like we measure alcohol. There's levels of alcohol percentages. Without going down that whole path in industry, I think there's certain takeaways from the alcohol industry, from the traditional 3-tier distribution system. And to keep breweries in business, we need to have cannabis beverages because they're the right fit for production. And that's where when we get together, it's fun to see those silver tanks because that gives you a chance to be in the door.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. And those opportunities to talk, and as we meet, right, pretty regularly, we get to hear from, the server, the bartender, the owner, right? We're hearing about their story, right? I have the opportunity to meet a few owners now, right? We hear where they're going to make those investments, when they're going to be ready to make the investment, right? The regulation scares in a well-established business. If I'm going to shift and change my business model and I make this, and then it's not available, right? So our patience level is there, right? So to have the patience to listen, to meet them where they're at, provides that opportunity. I mean, just to be a sounding board for them, right? I can absorb that. We can absorb that. You and I then can have that discussion on where it's going. So I think it's real important that people understand that we want to listen on what that looks like for them. If it's an employee or it's an owner, we need to hear where that model needs to look like. What are your concerns? Where do you want to grow that to?
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Yeah.
I can see great parallels for the future, and I appreciate you guys coming on the show today, especially on short notice. And if there's anything else you want to share before we go, what's the best way to get in touch? We've got a partnership.
I think the best way to get in touch is through Canna Connect. Honest, that's why we partnered with Canna Connect, right? We believe Canna Connect has that voice that's got the finger on the pulse of the cannabis society on what that is, where that's at. It'd be foolish for us to try to market on our own from scratch. Made way more sense it shows about a partnership, right? We were prepared, and we made that investment to partner with Canna Connect, because I think that message can be brought. We see how many different associations, how many different groups, they're not all quite aligned.
Right.
They all exist on this larger space, and I think Canna Connect does a really good job of bringing those guys together, at least to be able to use that source of information, and then they can come to that.
Amazing. And we'll put the link in the bio as this comes out in June, and we'll be having a web page set up by then, which is great. We're going to have this interview on the page, and we've got Brainerd in July coming up, July 30th, and then we'll be going to Duluth October 15th. And so that'll be another opportunity for Local 49 to get out into the greater Minnesota area where these cultivation facilities are being set up.
And we're looking forward to it. Yeah, it's been a great partnership thus far.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you. Appreciate it, Steve.
Patrick, great to see you.
Good to see you too.
Benjamin, thanks for coming back.
Great to see you, Steve.
Yeah. We'll be back next week on the Canna Connect Show.